So I'm delighted to hand over to Dean. He needs no introduction. You've seen him half the conference already. So over to Dean.
Thanks, Alistair. So this should be a very interesting panel. We have a very large chunk of the people who are interested in investing and working on drone freight technologies right now on this stage, which is pretty interesting and pretty unique. DiamondStream has invested in a drone freight company as well called Elroy Air, although they're not here today. So what I'd like to do is just start off to have each of you guys give a very brief introduction to the company that you represent, the concept that you have in terms of technology, target market, where you are in certification, and really, kind of what your business model is for success.
Cool. So I'm Damian. I'm from a company called Skyports, which I would say sort of stands out or is different to the rest of the panel. We are an infrastructure company first and foremost. So we do two things. One is we're looking to build out infrastructure in cities around the world for VTOLs, but also for cargo drones. So what we're doing at the moment, we're securing the right strategic locations to do that. I'm working alongside some of the leading VTOL manufacturers to understand their requirements, align route to markets, and to help the industry progress together to make it happen as soon as possible. And then on the other hand, we are also an operational business where we're working with companies such as these guys, where we actually acquire their drones, cargo drones, and we operate it for various clients, mainly in the medical space. So it could be hospitals, laboratories, etc.
My name is Felix, Arnold. I'm CEO of Appliance, and we are constructing and building what they call here eVTOL, but we're doing it with a series hybrid powertrain, because whatever anybody tells you, just with electricity, just with battery, you won't get further than 15 minutes with an acceptable payload. There's no way. So we do it with a gas turbine. So actually, we use a gas turbine like any helicopter. And actually, we are not competing with helicopters by for ecological reasons or something like this. It's just, we know by heart that we can produce such an VTOL, and we're just planning one we are flying already one with 200 kilos, and now we are planning one with 450 kilos. And we can produce such VTOLs for a fraction of the costs of a conventional helicopter. And this got purely technology reasons, and it got reasons how industry works today in air and space. Actually, I'm brought up in automotive industry, and we try to build such a helicopter like you might build a car. And that's it has a strong effect on costs. And we are going to bypass, I heard the word dinosaurs of the industry. We are going to bypass these dinosaurs of the industry, like many people do right now, because we are going not to hit their market, we are going to hit a market abroad, where there's no existing infrastructure you can rely on.
Great, thanks.
Hi everyone, name's Alex from company Flugauto. We're a B2B logistics company that wants to offer air transportation for industrial applications. So our customers are typically companies in oil and gas industry. Obviously the benefit here is being able to offer what a helicopter can do, that is speed and access to remote locations, but do it at the cost of operating a van. We're an early stage company. We started a year ago. We have a prototype already that's capable of carrying 30 kilograms over 30 kilometers. We're focusing on oil and gas for a couple of reasons. One is obviously we are complementing helicopters, but also in terms of where we can operate. We have a base in Dubai, which means that we can do a lot of testing with our clients even today. So that's overall the business.
Hi everyone. Dronamics is a fixed-wing aircraft company for cargo. We're unmanned. Our capacity is around 350 kilograms of cargo, mainly for e-commerce, so it's optimized for e-commerce companies. And we're mid to long range, so 2,500 kilometers is our planned range. We're a team of 20 engineers based in Sofia, Bulgaria, and here in London in the UK. We're part of the Founders Factory, which Alice made a short introduction in the morning. So why we started focusing on cargo is because we believe that we are much closer to the market in terms of revenue, in terms of how realistically this could be certified and regulated in the next 2 to 5 years. And also because we see that there is a large market and a large market opportunity if we bring down the cost of cargo. So currently only 1% of cargo parcels are delivered by air compared to trucking and trucks. So if we lower down the cost of air cargo, we can significantly increase the benefit for the end customers and also for our customers, which are e-commerce companies, pharma, and manufacturing. Yeah.
Hi, everyone. My name is Hannan. I'm the CEO and co-founder of a company called Volans-i. We're a San Francisco-based company, and we specialize in autonomous aerial delivery solutions. That means we have hybrid VTOL aircraft that deliver time-sensitive items to businesses. The value add we have for our customers is reducing downtime costs. We serve two industries currently on the defense side and on the heavy equipment industry side. Our vehicles range from 10-pound payload capacity, or 5 kilograms, to 200 pounds, or about 100 kilograms. And since they're hybrid propulsion systems, they have ranges from 60 kilometers to over 1,000 kilometers in range. And I think part of your question was about certification. We don't pursue any specific certification program and operate under either Part 107 rules in the US or in restricted airspace.
Great. Well, that's a terrific variety of stuff. What I heard was 4 different business models, none of which appear to be significantly overlapped, actually, which is fairly interesting. So, one of the challenges from an investment perspective that I see is there's a lot of risk of being too early in these markets. What's the time frame for getting something commercially available for each of you guys, and when can it scale? There's airspace issues, there's certification issues. We'll get to the where can you land it in a second. And I know Damian will have a lot to say about that. But when is this going to take off, and where? Hannan, why don't you start?
Yeah. Sure. I think with the aviation industry, historically, this is going to take off with defense first and then move on to the commercial market for many reasons. The first one being none of this stuff is possible in under current regulations, so you can only do these missions, applications, even testing in restricted airspace. And if a commercial application is to launch, which we have, it will be in areas where the regulations are much more relaxed or undefined, such as Africa or Southeast Asia or maybe Dubai. But if we're talking about Western countries, EASA, US, FAA, this can only happen in restricted airspace in a scalable manner. Otherwise, it's all going to be one-off demos.
Guys, is that right? Only restricted airspace, not scalable in Western markets?
So in our case, we are planning to do commercial tests with EasyJet by end of this year. So we have a very good relationship with EasyJet and with CAA. In terms of scaling up, of course, this also depends on the regulators and on certification. But it depends on how innovative your aircraft is. So for example, in our case, we have a standard configuration. We also have a Rotax engine, which is certified engine. So we don't have to, we're not that innovative in terms of the airframe and so on. Which we made that happen because we wanted to be a bit more pragmatic so we can reach the market much faster. In terms of scaling up, we hope that Asia and Africa actually are the interesting markets where the need is the highest, and also where regulators are very interested into leapfrogging this kind of technology. Yeah.
Great.
Yeah, so I think for us, it's kind of in between of the two. So I think to start off, it's restricted airspace. So for the next kind of 2 to 3 years, you're operating on private properties. That's why we chose oil and gas as a starting point. Middle East and Africa is where we see the opportunity. Now, what happens beyond that, it really depends on the regulators. I don't think scale will happen in the US first, but obviously everyone's looking at the US longer term. So for us, the approach is kind of keep your heads down, find that opportunity that will allow you to survive the next 2 to 3 years, and then when the regulators figure things out, we can start moving more to the Western world.
Felix?
With us, it's not about future. It's happening right now because we are in a bargaining situation with a 20 billion turnover company related to construction business. And they want from us a copter with a carrying capacity of 200 kilos payload. And the markets will be in Alaska, Siberia, South America, Africa, wherever there is no infrastructure you can rely on. So it's actually a lot more cheap using one of our copters than building a road over there. And there are regions as well where you can't build a road. I mean, there are such muddy regions in Siberia, there are frozen regions in Alaska, but they don't want to rely on expensive helicopters. For their business, they're just too expensive.
Great. So Damian, they want to go places with no infrastructure. Are they going to have any place to land?
Yeah, so that's a challenge in itself. But I think I can get sort of share some input on the operation side as well before we get into the discussion where we're going to land them. But we are currently involved in a number of drone delivery projects with various vehicle manufacturers. And all of the projects we get involved in, the reason we get involved is because we see the permanent operations being implemented fairly soon, given, obviously, regulatory approval. But on a fixed route, I think it's a fairly near future, even in Europe. So we're working on a project in Belgium, in Finland. And I would say the most progressive environment in Europe is it Europe? Iceland? It is. In Reykjavik, AHA, local e-commerce companies, is doing several numbers of flights a day for e-commerce application, which is quite fascinating. So I would say, yes, there's no single answer to how long it can take.
Actually, I'm the eldest here in the group, and though I got a rather historic perspective of it, I mean, remember very well, I mean, something like 14 years, James Bond would have a cellular phone. It was something very exclusive. And then something like 30 years ago, I would work in the Mediterranean. Every chica had a cellular phone, while there had been a discussion in Germany, if you would use a cellular phone, it would cause brain cancer. And the same is happening right now. I mean, we got an industry, or it's very simple. I mean, is there any Siemens cellular phone on the market? No, there isn't. I mean, and I'm from Stuttgart. I mean, the whole industry, I mean, they're really shitting their pants because of what is going on with electrification. And there is a real change in the industry. I mean a real change. And the market is existing already, and the market is asking for different crafts. I mean, not these historic crafts being designed something like 25 to 30 years ago. I myself, I work in a company, we are sitting in a company, they're milling down aluminum. So they're moving in a block of aluminum, weighing something like 5 kilograms, they mill it down to some 100 grams. So the part are maybe 200 grams, and they move in 5 kilograms aluminum. So, and this is, of course, I mean, if you would do this in the automotive industry, they would just fire you.
Great. So I'm not going to let you off the hook that easily, Damian. Where are these things going to land? Because it's great to talk about places with no infrastructure, but it does take infrastructure to service eVTOLs, right? And so no matter where you're going, how do you actually facilitate these sorts of trips?
So I think infrastructure will be, if not the key enabler to this industry at scale, it will be one of the most important layers to have there whilst everyone else is trying to certify the vehicles, because certification takes a long time. getting a planning application through for something called a vertiport, which there's not a single one in the world, will be equally as challenging, if not more. So what we're doing now is securing sites, which will be located on rooftops of commercial buildings, residential buildings, close to airports, to then be able to build out the infrastructure where the traffic will be so landing on, charging, and performing any other related services such as service, some basic maintenance. But I think it'll be interesting to see the various types of missions. So we've got long-haul flights that you guys are working on, which will probably land on land strips, airports surrounding, sort of around the city, and then the next leg of the journey might be a quadcopter or VTOL that will take the package on the sort of last mile of the journey. So I think there'll be a number of different vertiports or landing areas scattered across the ecosystem. There's not one single type.
And if you're doing things in Africa or Asia, Hannan, do you need to build a vertiport to make this work? Because I lived in Africa for 5 years. There's not a lot of infrastructure of any kind, and when you're flying to remote locations, even getting fuel out there sometimes can be a challenge.
Right. The whole selling point is that we can land these anywhere without infrastructure. Obviously, we look for clear areas where we can land on the dirt or grass or whatever is required. And it all comes back to the trip distance. So if you're talking about a round trip, so the model for us is our vehicles take off at a base where we're loading the package, go to the drop point, and with the payload, automatically release the payload and take off again and fly back home. In that case, you don't need infrastructure on the other side. You can just drop anywhere, or you can even drop it midair. But you do need infrastructure at the pickup point. But the way I think about infrastructure in general and basically the vision for our company, and I think the whole reason we're all here is there is a change happening in transportation, a revolution in transportation, and the way I look at it is if you were to go to Africa or a country with zero infrastructure, at what point would it make sense to invest $1 in infrastructure, that whether it be a road, tunnel, bridge, a hyperloop, and that I view on a three-dimensional graph. It's the frequency, the payload, and the level of customization. So if you have a high frequency, high payload, low level of customization cargo, like shipments of aluminium or cement going from 2 fixed points every day, at that point it makes sense actually to build a road or a tunnel or infrastructure. If you have a high level of customization, lower payload, even high frequency transportation, for example, your commute to work every day or a spare part delivery, it makes sense to use aerial transportation. Now, historically, aerial transportation required massive infrastructure, which was a runway for takeoff and landing. Now, with the advent of VTOL, you don't need that infrastructure. So that's the whole reason this revolution will happen in the transportation industry, is because of VTOL and the fact that you don't need to rely on infrastructure. Otherwise, you have to go back and have the same argument whether it makes sense to build a road or something else to enable this transportation.
Great. Sounds easy. One last question before we open it up to the audiences. I've heard different models around freight. A lot of people have talked about just building vehicles and selling them. Others have talked about building service networks like Uber, right? You guys have a view on that?
So very early on, we did some customer development. That was years ago, and we asked freight forwarders and logistics companies if they want to actually own the fleet, and it turns out that actually they want to rent it. So we picked a model where we actually can provide capacity to either to airlines or to freight forwarders, because it's much less effort for the client, and also we have a full control over how to operate the aircraft. So maybe it's going to be interesting to see what is the model in the future, because currently large cargo aircraft are produced by just a couple of companies, so they don't necessarily need to go to operate the cargo and the logistics service. But if you reduce the cost of the aircraft, then you can think of business models where manufacturer of the drone can actually also operate as a service provider.
And who optimizes the network in that case?
Sorry?
Who optimizes the network? The third party logistics company or the
Skyports.
drone company? There you go. Very good.
So we have kind of the short-term,
Alex.
mid-term solution and the longer term. So I think in the short term, we would operate them for our clients. So usually they have lower volumes. So essentially you set up the operations the same way that helicopters work now. They might stay at their oil and gas platforms, and when they're required, you fly them out. Now, once you get the volume up, and that goes back to your point, that's when you can start thinking about hub-to-hub kind of models. And at that point, it could be an on-demand service where essentially you're leasing capacity out to users. But for that to happen, you need vertiports, you need regulatory bodies to allow you to operate near cities. Yeah. For that, that's 5-7 years out. So before that, we kind of essentially provide this as a service to our customers.
Got it. Okay, so go ahead, Hannan. Yeah.
Yeah, we've offered 3 different models: direct sales, leasing, and delivery subscriptions. And it all comes back to the level of sophistication of the end customer. So a military customer always would rather purchase a unit. Then the second tier is a less sophisticated customer which would want to operate the vehicle, which would prefer a lease. And the final level would be someone who wants to be completely hands-off. And that in that case, you just offer them a delivery subscription, and they're completely asset-free.
Got it. And Damian, your guys' model for this?
So we are the operator. We secure the regulatory approval, the framework, and then we operate it, we staff it for the customer. So we do buy our aircrafts from vehicle manufacturers. We're also discussing a model where we pay subscription, so a monthly subscription to their end-to-end solution, which we then integrate. But one comment on the combination of models. I think one of our biggest challenges is having a constant and available supply of vehicles from manufacturers, because they often try to do everything instead of focusing on producing the best vehicle they can at scale, rather than sort of operating them for a couple of customers, which is a whole different operational model, different balance sheet. So I think we'll see a consolidation of the industry where some manufacturers will stick only to manufacturing the vehicles, and we might have a handful of manufacturers actually operate it as well.
Great. Any freight network operators here? No. Okay. Well, you've just been put on notice that the drone guys are coming for you.
Actually, we are going to operate from private ground to private ground within designated flight zones, out of the controlled airspace in designated flight zones, without FAA certification. And there's already a product on the market. It's a Yamaha Air Max. It's sold by more than 3,000 units, and it's on the market already without FAA certification. It's working, and it's sold. It's operating.
So why do certification at all, right? Okay, good. Questions? Okay. This is a great question for you, I think, Damian.
Yeah. It's a very good question. It's actually a hot topic here in the UK because some of the government funding that is supposed to go into the future flight space is tailored or focused on the regional airports or airports in general capability to service regional electric aircraft, VTOLs, potentially drones as well, although they're not really friends with airports at the moment. But I think we need to see that trend where we will start flying autonomous aircrafts from airports and to airports. That integration, seamless integration, needs to happen rather than creating a no-fly zones around airports. So in terms of the infrastructure requirements, the classic or essential things such as charging needs to be in place. In context of VTOLs, we'll probably see a number of individual vertiports or landing bays scattered across airports, whether it's on the car parks, next to the terminal, or within the actual airfield. That's to be determined. But on the cargo side, I think what we're going to see is an uprise in the regional airports servicing providers such as these guys in terms of landing cargo and passenger fixed wing later on.
So that's a very important point for us, actually. There are thousands of airports, airstrips in North America, South America, and Europe, which are unused and underutilized. So basically, we can tap into that capacity. We can offer a much more decentralized cargo, because cargo currently is only from large airports to large airports. In terms of infrastructure, we are working on the so-called minimum viable drone port, which basically means that in our case, we need 400 meters of airstrip. It could be also grass, a warehouse, which should be for the cargo capacity that is serving our e-commerce customers. So we're looking at very low capex to be invested into existing airports. Of course, we can focus on building new ones, but why don't we use the current infrastructure? I mean, it's already there, so we can just utilize it a bit better.
What about just flying into a factory parking lot?
We actually have that request. We have a request flying and landing on a warehouse logistics center. So that's going to be very interesting if this is going to happen. But of course, safety first. So we need to see how we can make this happen. Yeah.
Other questions? Lower duty of care for unmanned freight compared with passenger flights lead to higher accident rates. Are we going to have higher accident rates in freight?
Well, hopefully not. I think the way most of the vehicles are designed are actually less complicated than most other vehicles. So the things that can go wrong from a mechanical perspective are less. So for our vehicles, we're talking about a few hundred parts versus thousands or millions of parts in other vehicles. I think in terms of duty of care, that is one of the things we're looking into. So everyone here is talking about the vehicle and the vertiports, but no one's really talking about the rest of the operations. So what happens with maintenance? What happens with actually charging? That was mentioned a few panels before. So I think it's going to be important for the company that figures out all those elements of how do they maintain the vehicles and how do they maximize utilization of those vehicles.
What's been your experience of that, Hannan? Because you guys are actually flying, right?
Right, and I think that's where safety has a different definition in cargo. So the vehicle is disposable because, yes, you're losing cargo and you're losing the vehicle, but in passenger flight, if something happens, you're actually going to have a fatal accident versus just loss of assets. And that's why I think cargo could, where we can iterate faster in cargo, we could accept higher accidents rates as they're suggesting here, and the way the FAA defines it as is as a fatal accident. So if we can prove that throughout a route, even in Africa, we're not necessarily going to kill someone, but we might lose the aircraft. It's a total loss of aircraft. You've lost money, but no one's died. That's acceptable as opposed to, yes, you're going to actually pose risk to people. And with higher volumes, you obviously have higher accident rates, but you also have a faster learning curve as opposed to having to build something that is going to have 0 accidents when it takes off the first time.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense, and that's the rationale for doing this.
Hannan, a question on the financing aspect of it. I think you are probably aware that Uber got crushed in providing leasing to to its drivers, and so if you get a $5 million order, and let's say that the cost on that's $3.5 million out of cash that you're going to have to come up with. How excited are your investors to fork over $3.5 million for leasing at, let's say, 10 or 12% interest rate per year when their stated cost of capital to you is 25% or 35%? So how do the economics of that work?
Right. Yeah, as I mentioned, we did offer our free business models, but the one that actually makes sense most is the delivery subscription. Because on direct sales, yes, we have a high margin business. We can sell on 60, 65% margins right now, But over time, that will become commoditized and our margins would go down. On leasing, again, it's, as you said, it's not a great economic model for us or even our investors because we have to upfront the capital. The reason it's attractive for customers is because they will have ownership over the asset and how they control it. And the best model is subscriptions, where we own the assets and the customer pays for a subscription delivery service. Yeah.
Great. So I have one more question to you guys. So flying in Africa is interesting. There's not a lot of volume there. Where's the first scale application of this stuff? Like where you're flying, you know, not 10, but, you know, dozens, if not hundreds of aircraft.
Actually, we see our competitors not helicopters. I mean, there will be always helicopters, there will be always planes, there will be transition flight vehicles, but our competitors are snowmobiles, four-wheelers, trucks, boats. These are our competitors, not helicopters. I mean, they are out of competition.
So we obviously see oil and gas as the starting point, simply because right now there's a huge shift from moving kind of the assets off the balance sheet. So the way they manage inventory is that they kind of move inventory around different drilling locations. So we see a world where they have a central location for the inventory, and on demand they fly out that inventory using UAVs. So this would be a good enough volume to kind of...
How big's the market, do you think?
In terms of monetary, we estimate around $300 to $400 million. Of course, it's not a huge market, but it's a good starting point for us.
For this will be China and Southeast Asia, mainly driven by e-commerce growth. So if we have 250 million packages this year, in 4 years we're going to have double the size. So this is continued growth, and this trend is going to continue in the same direction. And also in terms of geography and locations, both China and Southeast Asian countries are very interesting for that scale.
Yeah, so I think as far as scalability is concerned, if you look at the markets, the B2C consumer deliveries is obviously by magnitude the larger market, but drone deliveries in that market make less sense because if you think about the value proposition to the customer, I always joke about us when we present our companies, we're not Amazon, we're not delivering your toothbrush to your backyard, we're delivering something that's very valuable to an end customer, and that's a spare part. And most people often confuse the value of the spare part as being something high, but it's actually not really that spare part that's very expensive. It's the machine that needs it that is much more expensive. And I think if this is going to scale in a very big market, it will be in spare parts deliveries, which is a $200 billion market. We see a lot of our competitors and activity happening in medical deliveries, or cargo deliveries. That is an apparent use case, but it's not a large market. I think in even the US, it's a $250 million market at max. And again, the accident rates there make a big difference. So if you're using it for organ transplants, if you drop a heart or a kidney or whatever you're transporting using the drone, that's equal to a fatal accident, as opposed to if I drop a spare part, yes, I lost a spare part, but still no one's dying at the end of the day. So I think spare parts is definitely where it's going to scale, and that's what we're focused on Africa too. Yeah.
Okay, very interesting.
I think the biggest driver behind the regulation mainly, and demand as well, is the social benefit that it can deliver. So whilst I agree that if you drop an organ, that equals fatality, but at the same time, the ability to deliver blood, samples, organs, whatever it may be, or a doctor at the end of the day with passenger VTOLs to the patient much quicker than with conventional methods of transportation, I think that will drive the public acceptance and the scale of the industry. So certainly in Europe, with these kind of use cases where rural medical, then urban medical, and then perhaps e-commerce in various cities. I think Scandinavia is really far ahead in terms of the approach to regulation. But even in Europe, we see quite a lot of mainly customers trying to make it happen for them by liaising with the regulators and attracting that technology.
Makes sense. And containerization, important in this market or not? Changed shipping, turned it upside down, right? Is it going to change freight, air freight? Hasn't worked with 747s, hasn't worked with other commercial aircraft in freight. People have tried it, it failed. What about drones?
So are you talking about automating the cargo switch, or what was your question?
Yeah, containerizing the cargo.
So we're going for, so basically our concept here is you contain the batteries with the cargo, and you do a switch off and switch out, because our end vision is that you'll do that automatically. I think for our industries and our customers, it's all about cost, and it's all about optimization. So minimizing that turnaround time and minimizing the time on the ground. So that's kind of what we're aiming for. I think time will tell if it'll happen.
And it looks like most, go ahead, sorry.
So the size of our drone is basically the same volume as a cargo van. So basically the idea is that the last mile of delivery could be handled by a cargo van from the drone port. Of course, this is not fully automated yet, but if we set up the standard for how to handle and unhandle the cargo, basically, we can automate it much faster.
Sorry, Hannan, did you have a comment as well, or no?
No, we have standard containers that we give to our customers, and they're disposable. So our model, again, is we basically just give them a plastic bucket and say, put whatever you want in there.
That sounds like how I move stuff around in my house. It works.
I mean, standardization is extremely important for us as an infrastructure provider. And that's mainly so that we can service as many vehicle types, vehicle manufacturers as possible. I don't think we'll ever be able to service everyone, but it's important that when we build the infrastructure, when we put it in place, that we can service as much of the market to just create a multiplier effect over the efficiency of the infrastructure that it provides.
Great. And then infrastructure on, we're done? Okay, great.
Do you want to answer those ones quickly or not?
Yeah, okay, great. So will cargo drones facilitate public acceptance of urban air mobility or play against it?
You see, we haven't understood yet how cellular phones changed our world and social media. And me being within the business since some years, I have no idea where this will lead to. But for sure, the changes will be enormous. Like today, I was in the tube, and from, let's say, 20 people, 19 would just look in this. I mean, they're not communicating anymore, they're not looking at each other. How these flying robots will affect our worlds, we don't know.
I think ultimately, yes. But in the short term, no. What we see with the drone incidents, it's definitely not putting the whole drone industry in a great light. And many people, they don't call passenger VTOLs, they call them passenger drones. They put them in one basket, understandably. So it's also the industry job to explain what the difference is. I don't know, actually. I don't know.
I'll just say a bit less pessimistically, I think it would massively. Once you prove that this works in an environment and it's safe, people will get used to it. Once they see the benefit on the cost side, and then actually with the whole helicopter and reducing the accidents, I think it will have a massive impact.
Or let's name it like this. In Pakistan, a mother wouldn't allow their child to go on the soccer place on a sunny day, only when it's raining, because they're scared of drones.
Well, hopefully we'll cure that over the next decade. We'll see, by hook or by crook. Gentlemen, thanks very much. Very interesting. I think this is going to be the place where the rubber meets the road for some of these new aviation technologies, and it'll be great to see you all here in the next year and two and see how it plays out.
Thank you.